imagine, just imagine, just imagine this. A group of men grappling over every single word and sentence of a document that would declare the independence and establishment of a new nation, promising liberty and justice for all. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. But wait, read between the lines. There are asterisks, invisible asterisks, but bold face. Asterisk. Unless, of course, you happen to be a native from whom the very land was stolen. Asterisk. Unless you happen to have black skin. Asterisk. Unless you happen to have brown skin. Asterisk. Unless you happen to be a woman, even the very wives, mothers, and daughters of the men who were writing about life, liberty, and happiness, and deriving just powers from the consent of the governed. No, you cannot own property. No, you cannot file for divorce. No, you can't practice law or medicine. No, you can't vote. And so while the men were writing the rules, women were already protesting. Wait a minute, hold the show. One of those women was Abigail Adams. She was the wife of the man who would become the second president of that new nation. She used her place of privilege and penned a letter to her husband, putting him and the other men on notice. March 31st, 1776. I desire you would remember the ladies, and do not put such unlimited power into the hands of husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could, if particularly care and attention is not paid to the ladies. We are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation. Oh, those rebellious, troublemaking women had to wait lots of minutes, years, decades. Remember, they had to convince men to grant any privilege they might have, and only men of great courage would be willing to share any power they might have had with a woman. Particularly the power that would come with voting. Why, once those women get to vote, then they'll want to run for public office. Why, one of them might even think she could be the vice president of the new country one of these days. No, we cannot let that happen. Nonetheless, those women and some of the men who supported them persisted, and their stories begged to be told again and again, lest they be forgotten, because some 143 years after Abigail Adams penned her letter, the 19th Amendment that would give the right to vote to white women had passed through the United States Senate and House of Representatives. Oh, of course, the work wasn't done. Ratification would still be needed in 36 states, but the movement was powerful and momentum had built. In fact, by August 1920, 35 states had ratified the 19th Amendment. Oh, success was so close that those suffragettes could almost taste it. Even in the conservative southern state of Tennessee, the Senate had voted in favor of ratification and sent the final decision to the House of Representatives. Oh, ratification was hotly contested in the Tennessee House. All of the legislators came donning boutonnieres to designate their position red for opposition. The House Speaker stepped up to his place and began to speak. The hour has come, the battle has been fought and won. I move that the motion to concur in the Senate action goes where it belongs, to the table. Which essentially meant the bill would die. A deafening silence blanketed the chamber as the roll was called. Aye, aye, nay, nay, aye. 48 ayes and 48 nays later, the House was deadlocked. The angry speaker chastised his colleagues and called for another vote, and the numbers did not change. 48 to 48, the amendment remained alive on the House floor. One of those men in the chamber was Harry Byrne. He was a 24-year-old, newly elected member of the House. Oh, he wore his bright red rose on his lapel, and yet under those gentle petals, in his pocket, was a letter from his mother. You see, Ernst Minger Byrne was the widow of a rather wealthy farmer. She had attended college and studied national as well as international affairs. She had been a teacher. Of course, she could milk cows, she could churn butter, she fended for her family. She even oversaw the work of the tenant farmers, most of whom were illiterate. They could vote. She could not. And so, in her words, I sat myself down on my little chair on the porch and penned a few lines to my son. Few lines was code for 7 pages. Dear son, I wish you were home. We have had nothing but rain since you left. Meeting still in progress. Ortho and I haven't been a single time. Uncle Bill and Mr. Bushnell came over this morning, stayed about an hour. They were in the Ford. We haven't had the car out since you left, and if this rainy weather does not let up, I fear we'll have to stay at home the rest of the summer. The Rockwood crowd is going to White Cliff on Labor Day. Will you be home by then? Hurrah! And vote for suffrage, and don't keep them in doubt. I noticed Chandler's speech. It was very bitter. I've been watching to see how you stood, but I have not seen anything yet. Mrs. Byrne went on to write about the purchase of a farm and the purchase of a house. She didn't know the prices. You know, Jack does not like to be interrogated. She continued with casual comments. You'll tire of what I'm writing, but I haven't anything else to write about. Except she did. But I do hope you are still in the notion of not making the race this fall. I hope you see enough of politicians to know it is not one of the greatest things to be one. What say ye? Question mark, question mark, question mark, underlined. The tenor of her letter changed again. The sale of another piece of property, the arm of someone's little boy that was broken, the preparation for a wedding, the illness of someone in the wedding, and the disappointment of the family because Harry would not be back in time to attend that wedding. There were a few other references to his returning home sooner rather than later, and then she composed her compelling conclusion. Write to Mother every time you have a chance, for I'm always looking for a letter when you're away. Don't forget to be a good boy and help Mrs. Thomas Cat with her rats. Is she the one that put a rat in ratification? No more from Mama this time. With lots of love, Mama. The young legislator had read his mother's letter, and he'd read it again. The words seemed to take up residence in his mind, and they refused to be quiet. I have an idea that 24-year-old man squirmed as if he were a mere boy again. Oh, please, don't make me take a stand on this issue. His wish fairy must have been on coffee break. The House reconvened. The angry speaker had no choice but to reconsider the original motion and call for a vote on the 19th Amendment's ratification. Harry Byrne had no choice either. He had to vote. He could vote in opposition of ratification and face the consequences his mother might deliver. He could vote in support of ratification and face the ire that he would get from his colleagues. I have an idea his body tied itself into knots, his knees knocked, his stomach churned as he dropped that flower onto the floor, stepped across the aisle, and responded, "I." There may have been a hush on that floor for a moment, but then the other Red Rose wearing men erupted in protest. They shouted absurdities. They called him a traitor of manhood's honor. They even threatened litigation. Despite their rage, the vote of 49 to 47 prevailed, changing the Constitution of the United States, assuring that white women would be able to vote. Sadly, women of color had to wait a lot longer. Byrne contended that he cast his vote based on morality and justice. He also acknowledged that a mother's advice is always safest for a boy to follow.